What happens when the man who promised you forever chooses to be with another woman while you're giving birth to his child? This isn't a movie plot. This is the story of Isabella Rossi, a woman living in a palace of glass and gold who discovered the cold, hard truth of her marriage in the sterile, unforgiving light of a hospital delivery room. It's a story of ultimate betrayal of a billionaire husband's shocking choice and of one ordinary person, a nurse named Sarah Jenkins, who saw everything and risked it all to expose a devastating secret. Stay with me as we uncover how a dream life turned into a waking nightmare, one unanswered phone call at a time. The silence in the Bel Air mansion was Isabella Rossi's least favorite sound. It was a heavy, expensive silence, insulated by triple-paned glass and acres of manicured gardens. It was the kind of quiet that reminded you just how alone you could be in a 20,000-square-foot home. At 8.5 months pregnant, every echo felt magnified, every shadow a little longer. Her husband, Ryan Sterling, was a master of the universe, a tech billionaire whose face was a regular feature on the covers of Forbes and Wired. He had built his empire, Sterling Industries, from a garage startup into a global behemoth. He had a mind that moved at the speed of light and a charm that could disarm world leaders. When he focused that charm on Isabella, a talented but unassuming architect he'd met at a charity gala, she had felt like the only person in the world. He had painted a future for her in dazzling strokes, a life of effortless luxury, of boundless love of a family to fill the cavernous halls of his estate. The first year had been a whirlwind of private jets, spontaneous trips to Paris, and whispered promises under Egyptian cotton sheets. But empires, Isabella was learning, were not built during business hours. Ryan's world was one of constant motion, of urgent calls at 3 a.m., of last-minute trips to close deals in Singapore or London. Lately, the silence had grown. Ryan was physically present less and less, and when he was home, he was emotionally distant, his face illuminated by the cool blue light of his phone. "It's the IPO, Bella," he'd murmur, kissing her forehead, without ever really looking at her. "The pressure is immense. Just a few more months, and it'll all be ours." She tried to believe him. She traced the swell of her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of their son, and told herself this was the price of the life he was building for them. She'd spend her days overseeing the final touches on the nursery, a celestial-themed wonderland with a hand-painted mural of the night sky. She'd chosen every detail with love, imagining Ryan rocking their baby to sleep under the soft glow of the crescent moon lamp. This evening was different. A strange, persistent ache had settled low in her back. She'd dismissed it at first as another one of late pregnancy's discomforts, but it was growing, tightening with a rhythm that felt unnervingly purposeful. She checked the time. 7:30 p.m. Ryan was supposed to be home an hour ago. He was at a board dinner, one of the many he'd had this month. She sent a text. "Hey, hope the dinner is going well. Feeling a little weird. Call me when you get a chance. Love you." The minutes ticked by. The ache coiled into a sharp, breathtaking clench. She gasped, holding on to the cool marble of the kitchen island. This was it. There was no mistaking it. Her water broke a warm gush that turned her initial anxiety into a jolt of pure adrenaline. Her hands trembled as she dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. "Ryan Sterling is unavailable. Please leave a message." She tried again. Voicemail, and again. Voicemail. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through the excitement. This wasn't right. His phone was never off. Never. She called his personal assistant, a brisk woman named Helen. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling. He's in a crucial meeting and left strict instructions not to be disturbed," Helen said, her voice polite but firm. "Helen, I'm in labor," Isabella said, her voice cracking. "You have to get a message to him. Tell him I'm going to St. Jude's Medical Center, please." There was a pause. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling. I'll do my best. Congratulations." The line went dead. "Do my best" wasn't the reassurance she needed. She was alone. The contractions were coming faster now, waves of intense pressure that forced the air from her lungs. Tears of fear and frustration streamed down her face. She slid down the kitchen cabinet, her designer maternity dress now soaked and ruined. In the vast, silent mansion, surrounded by every luxury money could buy, Isabella Rossi had never felt so poor. She clutched her belly, whispering to her unborn son. "It's okay, little one. It's okay. Daddy's just busy. He'll be there. He has to be." With a surge of effort, she crawled to her purse, her fingers fumbling for her phone. She had one more call to make. Not to the man who promised her the world, but to the one person she knew would answer. Her best friend, Olivia. Across town, in a sleek, glass-walled restaurant overlooking the glittering expanse of Los Angeles, Ryan Sterling swirled a $500 a glass Bordeaux in his hand. The IPO was indeed on his mind, but it wasn't the reason for the phone perpetually buzzing face down on the white linen tablecloth. Across from him sat Chloe Decker, the fiercely ambitious head of PR for Sterling Industries. Chloe was everything Isabella wasn't. Where Isabella was soft curves and gentle warmth, Chloe was sharp angles and cool fire. With raven black hair cut in a severe, stylish bob, and eyes that missed nothing, she was as much a predator as Ryan was in the boardroom. For the last 6 months, she had been his shadow, his confidant, and his secret. The affair had started as a spark of intellectual chemistry during late-night strategy sessions, and had quickly ignited into a consuming fire. Chloe understood his hunger, his relentless drive. She didn't ask for quiet nights at home. She thrived on the chaos and the power. "You're distracted," Chloe said, her red lacquered nail tapping the stem of her wine glass. "Just a lot going on," Ryan replied, his gaze flickering to the dark screen of his phone. He'd seen the calls from Isabella. He'd seen the text. Feeling a little weird, he'd rationalized it instantly. It was probably just Braxton Hicks. The doctor said first babies were often late. She was being overly anxious as usual. He'd call her when he was done. This was important. More important than this. Chloe leaned forward, her voice a low purr. "We're celebrating Ryan. We landed the VirtueCon deal. This is our victory." She slid her foot out of her Christian Louboutin heel and ran it slowly up his calf under the table. A thrill shot through him, erasing the flicker of guilt. He picked up his phone, but not to call Isabella. He silenced it completely and slid it into his jacket pocket. "You're right. To us." He raised his glass, the lie tasting like expensive wine. An hour later, as they were leaving the restaurant, Chloe suddenly stumbled on the curb, letting out a theatrical cry of pain. "Oh my God! My ankle!" Ryan was at her side in an instant. Her ankle was already beginning to swell. "It's broken, I'm sure of it," she wailed, clinging to him. The tears in her eyes looked genuine, her pain palpable. In reality, it was a sprain, painful, yes. But she was an expert at amplifying drama for effect. This was an opportunity. Okay, easy, Ryan said, scooping her into his arms with a grunt. I'll take you to the hospital. Which one is closest? St. Jude's isn't far from here. I think, she whispered, burying her face in his neck. The choice was deliberate. She knew it was where Isabella was supposed to give birth. It was a calculated, cruel move designed to test him, to force a choice. As Ryan's Bentley sped towards the hospital, his mind was a whirlwind. He felt a pang of unease about Isabella, a nagging voice he'd been silencing for months. But now, with Chloe beautiful and wounded in his arms, the immediate crisis took precedence. Chloe needed him. Isabella was at home, probably asleep. He'd deal with that later. Meanwhile, Olivia's Prius screeched to a halt in the St. Jude's emergency drop-off lane. She helped a pale, sweating Isabella into a wheelchair, her own face a mask of worried fury. "I'm going to kill him, Izzy. I swear to God when I get my hands on him," Olivia muttered, pushing the chair through the automatic doors. "No, Liv, please," Isabella gasped, gripping the armrests as another contraction seized her. He doesn't know. His assistant was going to tell him. He'll be here. The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. They were whisked up to the maternity ward, a serene, spa-like floor, funded in no small part by a 7-figure donation from Ryan Sterling himself. A plaque bearing his name gleamed on the wall by the nurse's station. Isabella was settled into a private birthing suite, the size of a small apartment with panoramic city views. Nurses bustled in and out, their efficiency a stark contrast to the emotional chaos brewing inside her. One of those nurses was Sarah Jenkins, a veteran with 15 years of experience in labor and delivery. Sarah had a no-nonsense demeanor that hid a deeply compassionate heart. She was a single mother of 2 who worked double shifts to make ends meet and had seen every kind of family drama play out in these rooms. She knew the Sterling name, of course. Who didn't? She'd been briefed that Mrs. Sterling was coming in, and the staff was to be on high alert to provide exemplary service. As she hooked Isabella up to the monitors, she noted the patient's distress, which seemed to go beyond labor pains. Her eyes were constantly darting to the door, her phone clutched in her hand. "Is your husband on his way, dear?" Sarah asked gently, her voice calm and steady. Isabella's lip trembled. He's in an important meeting. He should be here soon." Sarah had heard that line before. It almost never ended well. She gave Isabella's hand a reassuring squeeze. "All right then. Let's focus on you and this little one for now. You're doing great." But as the hours dragged on, and Isabella's labor intensified into a primal rhythm of pain and exhaustion, the door to the suite remained stubbornly closed. Ryan Sterling was still a no-show. Downstairs, in the chaos of the emergency room, another drama was just beginning to unfold, and Sarah Jenkins was about to find herself right in the middle of it. The maternity ward at St. Jude's was an oasis of calm compared to the frantic energy of the emergency room downstairs. Sarah Jenkins moved with a practiced economy of motion, her focus entirely on Isabella. The baby's heart rate was steady, and Isabella's vitals were good, but her emotional state was deteriorating. With every passing hour, a piece of the hopeful, trusting woman who had arrived seemed to chip away, replaced by a raw, painful vulnerability. Olivia stayed by her side, a fierce guardian wiping Isabella's brow, feeding her ice chips, and whispering words of encouragement. But they both knew whose words Isabella was desperate to hear. "Still nothing?" Olivia asked quietly, during a lull between contractions, gesturing to the phone on the bedside table. Isabella just shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her temple into her hairline. She had stopped trying to call an hour ago. The humiliation of hearing his automated voicemail again and again was too much to bear. Sarah overheard them from the corner of the room, where she was documenting notes. Her heart ached for the woman in the bed. She'd seen billionaires and busboys, and she knew that when it came to moments like this, money meant nothing. All that mattered was showing up. Around 11 p.m. her shift was supposed to end, but her replacement had called in sick. With a sigh, she agreed to stay on for a double. "I'll just run down to the cafeteria and grab some coffee," she told the charge nurse. "Be back in 10. The elevator ride down was a brief reprieve. But as the doors opened onto the ground floor, she was met with a scene of controlled chaos. Gurneys lined the hallways, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and the low murmur of dozens of conversations. As she navigated the crowded corridor towards the ER to say a quick hello to a colleague, she saw it. A small commotion was unfolding near the triage desk. At the center of it was Ryan Sterling. He looked even more imposing in person than in his magazine photos, radiating an aura of wealth and impatience. But he wasn't looking for the maternity ward. He was supporting Chloe Decker, who was perched on the edge of a chair, her foot propped up, looking pained and beautiful. "I need a doctor now," Ryan was saying, his voice low, but laced with steel. He wasn't asking. He was commanding. "We have a potential fracture. She's in a great deal of pain." A harried-looking triage nurse, a young man named Ben, was trying to explain the system. "Sir, we have several critical cases ahead of you. It will be a bit of a wait. We need to get her vitals and—" "I don't think you understand," Ryan cut him off, pulling out a black Amex card as if it were a scepter. "I am Ryan Sterling. I am one of this hospital's most significant benefactors. This is an emergency. Get me your chief of staff and the best orthopedic specialist you have on call. Now." Sarah froze, half hidden behind a pillar. Her tired brain struggled to connect the dots. Ryan Sterling. Here. In the ER. With a woman who was clearly not his pregnant wife. While his wife was upstairs alone in the hardest hours of her life, calling out for him. The chief of staff, Dr. Matthews, appeared as if summoned by magic, his face a mixture of deference and professional concern. "Mr. Sterling, what seems to be the problem?" Within minutes, the hospital's rigid protocol seemed to melt away. Chloe was whisked back into a private examination room, bypassing a dozen other waiting patients, including an elderly woman with a persistent cough and a child with a bleeding forehead. Ryan followed his arm possessively around Chloe's shoulders. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, a cold fury rising in her chest. She saw the looks exchanged between the other nurses, a mix of resentment and weary resignation. This was how the world worked. Money and power bought you a spot at the front of the line, even in a place of supposed equality like a hospital. She walked over to the triage desk, her expression carefully neutral. "Ben, what was that all about?" Ben rolled his eyes, lowering his voice. "You know who that was, Ryan Sterling. Threw his name around like a grenade. His girlfriend there twisted her ankle. A twisted ankle. Meanwhile, I've got a guy in Bay 4 with possible cardiac arrest and a kid with a 104-degree fever. But sure, let's stop everything for a sprain." "His girlfriend," Sarah repeated the word, landing like a stone in her gut. "Yeah. Some PR exec from his company, I heard one of the paramedics say. Name's Chloe Decker. Guess the wife is out of the picture. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The unanswered calls, the important meeting, the lies. This wasn't an unfortunate coincidence. This was a choice. Ryan Sterling had made a choice. Sarah's fatigue vanished, replaced by a surge of protective anger. She thought of Isabella upstairs, her face etched with pain and longing, clinging to the fiction that her husband was just caught up at work. She thought of the innocent baby about to be born into this mess. Her medical training, her professional ethics, screamed at her to stay out of it. It wasn't her business. Her job was to care for the patient in front of her. But her humanity screamed louder. What was happening was wrong on a fundamental level. She abandoned her quest for coffee. Her purpose had changed. She turned and headed back to the elevator, her mind racing. She didn't know what she was going to do yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She could not let Isabella Rossi give birth in a bubble of lies. The truth, however brutal, was coming. As Sarah Jenkins rode the elevator back up to the maternity ward, her mind was a tempest. Her professional code was clear. Patient privacy was sacrosanct. Divulging information about one patient, or in this case a patient's visitor in the ER to another, was a fireable offense, a violation that could cost her the nursing license she had worked so hard for. Yet the image of Isabella's hopeful, tear-filled eyes was seared into her brain. How could she stand by and watch that woman go through the miracle of birth, only to be blindsided by a devastating betrayal afterward? When she re-entered Suite 702, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The obstetrician had just been in. Isabella was fully dilated. It was time to push. "Where is he?" Isabella panted, her voice raw with effort and emotion. It was no longer a question. It was a desperate plea to the universe. Olivia shot Sarah a helpless look. "He's not coming, is he? We have to do this. You and me. For the baby." Sarah's resolve hardened. She couldn't tell her directly. She couldn't risk her career, her ability to provide for her own children. But she was a smart woman. There were other ways to deliver a message. As she prepped the room, she subtly moved the bedside table closer to Olivia. She logged into a nearby workstation on wheels, a portable computer cart used for charting. While appearing to update Isabella's medical records, she opened a web browser. With a few quick, discreet clicks, she navigated to a popular, notoriously fast celebrity gossip website, one she knew monitored the movements of people like Ryan Sterling religiously. Her gamble paid off. There it was, posted less than 20 minutes ago. A grainy cell phone picture, likely snapped by another patient or a visitor in the ER waiting room. The headline was salacious and direct. "Billionaire, Ryan Sterling rushes mystery, woman to St. Jude's ER. Where's his pregnant wife?" The photo was unmistakable. It showed Ryan, his face a mask of concern, with his arm around a stylishly dressed Chloe Decker as she was being helped into a wheelchair by a paramedic. The caption speculated wildly. Is there trouble in paradise for the tech mogul just as he's about to become a father? Sarah left the page open on the screen. Then she created a diversion. "Olivia, can you come here for a moment?" She called, her voice urgent but controlled. "I need your help with this pillow placement behind her back. It's crucial for her positioning right now." As Olivia moved to the other side of the bed, Sarah accidentally bumped the computer cart, rolling it a few feet, so it was now directly in Olivia's line of sight. "Oh, clumsy me," Sarah muttered, pretending to busy herself with Isabella. "Just ignore that." But Olivia's eyes were already glued to the screen. She saw the photo. She read the headline. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, then dawning horror, and finally a white-hot, silent rage. Her gaze shot up and met at Sarah's. In that one fleeting moment of eye contact, an entire conversation took place. Sarah's eyes conveyed a quiet apology and a grim confirmation. "I'm sorry you have to see this, but she needs to know. You're the one who has to tell her." Olivia gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you. I understand." Just then, the obstetrician, Dr. Miller, swept back into the room. "All right, Isabella, on the next contraction. I need a big push. Let's meet this baby." The raw, primal process of childbirth took over. For the next 30 minutes, Isabella was consumed by a world of pain and effort. She was a warrior, channeling every ounce of her being into bringing her son into the world. Olivia was right there holding her hand, her voice a constant stream of encouragement, but her words were now infused with a new protective ferocity. At 1:17 a.m., Leo Alexander Rossi was born with a healthy, lusty cry. He was perfect. He was placed on Isabella's chest, a tiny, warm, wriggling miracle. Isabella sobbed tears of joy relief and overwhelming love washing over her. For a few blissful, sacred moments, the world outside the room, the unanswered calls, the missing husband, all faded away. There was only her and her son. As the nurses cleaned up and Dr. Miller finished her work, a fragile peace settled over the room. Isabella, exhausted but euphoric, gazed down at her son's perfect face, his tiny fingers curled around her own. It was into this sacred space that Ryan Sterling finally walked. He looked rumpled and tired, but he was smiling, a bouquet of expensive-looking roses in his hand. "I'm so sorry, Bella." He began, his voice smooth and practiced. "Helen just got a hold of me. My phone died, and it was one crisis after another at work. But I'm here now. I'm here." He moved towards the bed to kiss her, to look at his son. But before he could reach her, Olivia stepped in his way. Her face was cold, her eyes like chips of ice. She held up her phone, the screen displaying the gossip article. "Your phone died." Olivia's voice was dangerously quiet. "Was that before or after you rushed your mistress, Chloe Decker, to the emergency room?" "Your wife was in labor, Ryan. While she was screaming in pain, you were downstairs holding another woman's hand over a sprained ankle." The color drained from Ryan's face. He was speechless. His carefully constructed world of lies had just been detonated. Isabella looked up, her blissful bubble bursting with a devastating pop. The words didn't seem real. "Mistress, emergency room." She looked from Olivia's furious face to Ryan's shocked, guilty one. And then she knew. The cold, creeping dread she had been suppressing for months solidified into a certainty that was as sharp and painful as any contraction. She looked down at the beautiful baby boy in her arms, her son. Then she looked back at the man she thought she knew, the father of her child. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. Ryan stammered, "Bella, listen, it's not what it looks like. Let me explain." "I said—" Isabella repeated, her voice rising with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "Get out." From the corner of the room, Sarah Jenkins watched her heart breaking and swelling all at once. The truth was out, and the fight had just begun. The silence that followed Isabella's command was heavier than any gilded quiet in her Bel Air mansion. It was a dense, suffocating silence, filled with the wreckage of a marriage. Ryan Sterling, a man accustomed to commanding rooms and bending people to his will, stood utterly powerless. The roses he held suddenly looked garish and pathetic. "Isabella, please," he tried again, taking a step forward. "Let's not do this now. Not here. Think about the baby." It was the wrong thing to say. "I am thinking about him," she retorted, her eyes flashing with a fire he had never seen before. She instinctively pulled Leo closer to her chest, a mother lion shielding her cub. "And what I'm thinking is that he will not grow up watching his father lie. He will not learn that this is how a man treats a woman, let alone the mother of his child. I have thought about my son Ryan. Have you—" Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing his arrogance. He looked to Olivia for help, but she stared back at him with pure contempt. He looked at Nurse Sarah, who met his gaze with a coolly professional, unreadable expression, before turning to check Isabella's IV drip. He was surrounded by a fortress of female solidarity, and he had no weapons to breach it. I made a mistake," he finally managed to say. His voice strained. "Chloe, she's just a colleague. She fell. I was helping her." "A colleague," Olivia scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is it standard company policy to hold a colleague's hand in the ER while your wife is giving birth to your heir upstairs? Your excuse is as cheap as your character, Ryan." Ryan finally let the roses fall to the floor with a soft thud. His expression shifted from panicked guilt to a familiar, colder mask of control. He was a businessman. This was now a negotiation, a matter of damage control. "Fine," he said, his tone hardening. "This is not the time or the place. Isabella, you're overwrought. You've just been through a major medical event. We will talk when you've had time to rest and think clearly." He turned to leave, assuming his authority would be the final word. "There's nothing to talk about." Isabella's voice rang out, stopping him in his tracks at the door. "Except for through my lawyer." That got his attention. He turned back slowly, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Isabella. You're emotional. You're not thinking straight." "Oh, I have never thought more clearly in my entire life," she said, her voice steady and eerily calm. The adrenaline of childbirth and the shock of betrayal had fused into a kind of hyper-clarity. The fog of her lonely marriage had lifted, revealing the ugly, simple truth. She had been a convenience, a beautiful prop to complete the picture of his perfect life. Her son deserved more. She deserved more. "Olivia, would you please call Catherine Ford for me? Tell her I need her." Catherine Ford wasn't just any lawyer. She was a legendary shark-toothed divorce attorney, known for eviscerating powerful men in court. The mention of her name was a declaration of war. Ryan's face went pale. This was spiraling out of his control far faster than he could have imagined. "You don't want to do this, Bella," he warned, a hint of menace creeping into his voice. "You have no idea what you're starting." "It's Isabella," she corrected him, her chin held high. "And you're wrong. I know exactly what I'm starting. I'm starting my new life. With my son. Now for the last time, get out of my room." Defeated, Ryan finally left the heavy door clicking shut behind him. The moment he was gone, Isabella's iron resolve crumbled. A deep, gut-wrenching sob escaped her lips. She wept for her broken heart, for her shattered dreams, for the family she thought she was building. Olivia rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her friend. Sarah Jenkins approached the bed quietly. She checked the baby who had slept through the entire confrontation, then turned her attention to Isabella. She took a warm cloth and gently wiped the tears from Isabella's face. "You were so strong," Sarah said softly, her voice full of a respect that went far beyond the nurse-patient relationship. "You and that little boy are fighters." Isabella looked up at her, her eyes red and swollen. How did Olivia know that article?" Sarah met her gaze and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Sometimes the truth just finds a way of coming out right when it needs to. "You just focus on him," she said, nodding toward the peacefully sleeping Leo. "He's all that matters right now." In that moment, Isabella understood. This quiet, unassuming nurse had done more for her than just provide medical care. She had given her the truth, a bitter and painful gift, but a gift nonetheless. It was the key that would unlock her from the gilded cage she hadn't even fully realized she was in. As the first rays of dawn crept over the Los Angeles skyline, casting a soft, hopeful light into the hospital room, Isabella Rossi held her son and felt a profound shift within her. The grief was still there, a vast and aching ocean. But for the first time, she could see the shore. She had lost a husband, but she had found her son, and in doing so, she had found a strength she never knew she had. The steel was in her spine now. It was permanent. The first light of dawn that filtered into the hospital suite did little to warm the chilling reality of Isabella's new world. The euphoria of childbirth had evaporated, leaving behind the bitter residue of betrayal and a profound, aching grief. She hadn't slept. Instead, she had spent the long, dark hours simply watching her son Leo breathe. His tiny chest rose and fell in a steady, peaceful rhythm, a stark contrast to the maelstrom raging within her. He was a perfect, innocent anchor in a sea of chaos, and every time she looked at his face, her resolve hardened from a fragile flicker into a steady, burning flame. The tears had dried, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar clarity. The woman who had checked into this hospital, naively hoping her husband would appear, was gone forever. By 8 a.m., the fortress began to take shape. Her first call had been to Olivia. Her second was to the lawyer Olivia had recommended years ago for a minor contract dispute, who in turn gave her the private number for a legend. The arrival of Catherine Ford was less a visit and more a strategic occupation, a woman in her late 50s with a razor-sharp bob of silver hair and eyes that seemed to dissect everything they saw. Catherine moved with an electrifying confidence that instantly altered the atmosphere in the room. She placed a sleek leather briefcase on the visitor's table, her movements economical and precise, and gave Isabella a look that was a mixture of professional empathy and tactical assessment. "First we build a wall," Catherine said, her voice a calm, commanding force. She didn't waste time with platitudes. "As of this moment, you will have no direct contact with Ryan Sterling. No calls, no texts, no emails. All communication will go through my office. He will try to manipulate you to prey on your emotions and the vulnerability of your situation. We will not allow it." Within the hour, it was done. Hospital administration, prompted by a call from Catherine that likely included pointed reminders of their liability in protecting a patient, dispatched 2 discreet but firm security guards to the maternity floor. Ryan Sterling's name, the same name that adorned the donor plaque on the wall, was now on a list of individuals barred from entry. His reaction was immediate and predictable. Isabella's phone began to buzz incessantly. Catherine instructed her to put it on silent. Later, they would listen to the voicemails together. The first was pleading his voice, thick with a feigned remorse she could now see through so clearly. The second was laced with frustration. By the third, his tone had shifted to the cold, menacing authority of the man he was in the boardroom. "Isabella, this is insanity," his recorded voice snarled. "You are being irrational. Catherine Ford is a grenade you do not want to throw into our lives. Call this off. Let's be adults and handle this privately. Don't force my hand." "That is a threat," Catherine noted calmly, making a note on a legal pad. "Excellent. He's already making mistakes." The story of the confrontation, fueled by the ER gossip, and Sarah Jenkins' anonymously leaked testimony from the previous part, hit the press with the force of a hurricane. Isabella watched numb as a news report played on the television in her room. Her own wedding photo splashed across the screen next to the grainy paparazzi shot of Ryan and Chloe. The headlines were brutal. Sterling's shame billionaire chooses mistress over wife in labor. Inside, Ryan Sterling's ultimate betrayal. Her private agony had become a public spectacle. She felt a wave of nausea, a deep sense of violation. "They're turning my life into a soap opera," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let them," Catherine countered, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Right now, public opinion is our greatest weapon. He controls the money, the influence, the corporate machine. We control the narrative. He is a villain in a story of his own making, and we are going to let him play the part." Ryan, realizing his attempts at direct contact were futile, unleashed his own legal arsenal. A team of lawyers from a top corporate firm, led by a notoriously ruthless litigator named Alistair Harrison, sent over their first official communication. It wasn't a letter. It was a book, a thick-bound document detailing a proposed settlement. Catherine spread the pages across the foot of the hospital bed. The numbers were astronomical, a sum designed to shock and awe. A 9-figure lump payment the Bel Air mansion signed over to her, a lifetime stipend. It was a king's ransom. But Isabella's eyes scanned past the figures to the clauses buried in the dense legalese. There was an ironclad, career-ending non-disclosure agreement that would prevent her from ever speaking about him or their marriage. And then there was the custody arrangement, joint legal custody, with Ryan retaining final say on all major decisions regarding Leo's schooling, healthcare, and travel. "These aren't terms. These are golden handcuffs," Isabella said, a bitter taste in her mouth. "He thinks he can buy my silence and rent my son on weekends." She looked at the document, at the cold transactional language, attempting to put a price on her life and her child's future. It was the ultimate insult. He wants to control Leo's life from a distance, to mold him into another Sterling, to have a son without the sacrifice of being a father. She looked at Catherine, her eyes clear and resolute. "Tell them to go to hell. I don't want a single dollar of his alimony. I have a career. I can support myself. I want what is legally required for child support and nothing more. What I want is sole, unassailable custody of my son. I want my freedom." Catherine Ford allowed herself a small, thin smile. This was the moment she knew they would win. They were not fighting for money. They were fighting for a life. It was a motivation Ryan Sterling and his legal pit bulls would never comprehend. Meanwhile, the shock waves of that night were devastating Chloe Decker. Hounded by reporters and eviscerated online, she became a pariah. Sterling Industries, in a move of pure corporate self-preservation, terminated her contract, citing a vague morals clause. The calls and texts she sent to Ryan went increasingly unanswered. He had used her to gratify his ego, and now, as a liability, she was being cut loose with the same cold efficiency he applied to a failing business venture. She had been a willing participant in the betrayal, but she was also just another casualty of the wreckage he left in his wake. Throughout these tumultuous days, Nurse Sarah Jenkins remained a quiet, steady presence. She never spoke of the case, never acknowledged her pivotal role. But her support was unwavering. She would come into the room on her break coup over Leo and make sure Isabella was eating. She'd bring her a cup of chamomile tea late at night, offering a moment of simple human kindness in the midst of the legal storm. In their silent, shared glances, there was a powerful understanding. Sarah wasn't just a nurse. She was a witness, an ally, a reminder that the world still contained good and decent people. On the final day, as she was signing the discharge papers, Isabella paused at the signature line. Isabella Sterling. The name felt like a costume, a role she had been playing. It was the name of a woman who waited, who hoped, who made excuses. It was not her name. She struck a line through Sterling, and with a firm, steady hand, signed Isabella Rossi. "I'm taking my name back," she told Catherine, a sense of empowerment washing over her. "I am who I was before I met him, but stronger." When the time came to leave, she didn't step into a chauffeured town car destined for the opulent prison in Bel Air. Instead, Olivia was waiting for her in her sensible sedan, a brand-new top-of-the-line car seat, safely installed in the back. Catherine had arranged for a secure, unlisted rental, a charming, sun-filled bungalow, with a small garden miles away from the Sterling world. It was modest by her recent standards, but it felt like a kingdom. As she walked out of the hospital doors with Leo nestled safely in her arms, Isabella took her first breath of free air. She had walked in as Ryan Sterling's wife, a woman living a life defined by a powerful man. She was walking out as Isabella Rossi, a mother, a fighter, the sole architect of her own future, ready for the war to come. The months that followed Isabella's departure from the hospital were a grueling education in the art of war, waged not on a battlefield, but in the sterile conference rooms and soulless court filings of family law. Ryan, stripped of his ability to control her, directly unleashed the full, terrifying power of his wealth through his legal team. Alistair Harrison employed a scorched earth strategy designed to bury Isabella under an avalanche of paperwork depositions and public humiliation. It was a war of attrition intended to drain her emotionally and financially until she had no choice but to accept his terms. They delved into every corner of her life with invasive forensic precision. They subpoenaed her university records, her old employment files, even the financial statements of her parents, searching for any hint of instability or greed. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years were deposed, asked leading questions about her character and her ambitions. The narrative Harrison's team began to weave in the press was insidious and cruel. Isabella Rossi was not a victim, but a calculating opportunist who had married for money and was now feigning emotional distress to secure an exorbitant payout. They painted her as an unstable new mother, her righteous anger twisted into a portrait of postpartum hysteria. There were nights when Isabella, alone in her quiet bungalow after Leo was finally asleep, would sit at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, and feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. The sheer venom of the attacks, the public twisting of her reality, was suffocating. In those moments of doubt, she would walk into Leo's room and watch him sleep. His small hand curled around her finger. He was her true north. This fight wasn't about her pride. It was about his future. It was about ensuring he grew up in a home defined by integrity, not by a father who believed everything and everyone had a price tag. Catherine Ford was her shield and her sword through it all. She met every attack with a calm, surgical countermove, dismantling Harrison's arguments with facts and evidence. But she knew the tide of the battle would not be turned in the court of public opinion by legal maneuvering alone. They needed a moment that would cut through the noise and reveal the simple human truth of the matter. "It's time," Catherine said one afternoon, several months into the proceedings. "We need to depose Nurse Sarah Jenkins." Isabella felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. "Catherine, I can't ask her to do that. Harrison will tear her apart. She could lose her job. She has a family to think about." "She is also the only person who was an objective witness to both events that night," Catherine countered, gently but firmly. "She saw you in labor, and she saw Ryan in the emergency room. Her testimony isn't about legal strategy. It's about moral authority. Harrison can't touch that. I've already spoken with her, and she has agreed. She believes it's the right thing to do." The deposition took place in a soulless wood-paneled conference room. Sarah Jenkins, in her simple nursing scrubs, which she wore with a quiet dignity, looked small and out of place against the backdrop of a dozen lawyers in $1,000 suits. Alistair Harrison began his questioning with a tone of patronizing condescension. He picked at the details of her shift, the timing of her break, trying to suggest her memory was unreliable, clouded by the fatigue of a long workday. Sarah answered every question calmly, her voice steady, her recollections precise. Frustrated Harrison shifted his tactics to character assassination. "Nurse Jenkins," he began, leaning forward with a predatory smile. "You work in a hospital that receives significant funding from Mr. Sterling. Weren't you a little starstruck seeing a man of his stature come into your emergency room?" "No, sir," Sarah replied evenly. "I saw a man whose partner was in need of a doctor. And isn't it true?" Harrison pressed on his voice, dripping with insinuation, "that Ms. Rossie's legal team, known for its vast resources, has offered you compensation for your time here today? A bonus perhaps for a version of events favorable to their client?" Catherine shot to her feet. "Objection, counsel, is baselessly impugning the witness's integrity." But Sarah simply held up a hand, a gesture of calm that silenced the room. She turned her clear, steady gaze directly on Alistair Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, I have been a nurse for 15 years. In that time, I have held the hands of dying patients and helped bring new life into this world. I have seen people at their absolute best and their absolute worst. My compensation is my paycheck, which I use to pay my mortgage and feed my children." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. "That night, I saw two things. Upstairs, I saw a woman fighting through hours of agony to bring her son into the world, calling out for a husband who never came. And downstairs, I saw that same husband commanding the attention of the entire ER staff for a woman with a sprained ankle. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the legal definition of infidelity or abandonment. But I am a human being, and I know the definition of decency. I am here because I was a witness to a profound lack of it. That is not a version of events. It is the truth, and it has no price." A stunned silence filled the room. Sarah's testimony was not a legal argument. It was a moral judgment delivered with an unshakable conviction that made Harrison's cynical tactics look cheap and hollow. A transcript of the deposition was leaked within hours. It went viral. The story was no longer a messy celebrity divorce. It was a David and Goliath tale. News outlets championed the hero nurse of St. Jude's who spoke truth to power. Sarah Jenkins's simple, powerful words resonated with millions. Ryan Sterling was no longer just an unfaithful husband. He was a symbol of a corrupt, morally bankrupt elite. This was the final, fatal blow. The board of Sterling Industries facing a catastrophic collapse in public trust, and a shareholder rebellion convened an emergency meeting. Ryan was given a choice: resign as CEO or be fired. His empire, the thing for which he had sacrificed his family and his honor, had turned on him. The call from Alistair Harrison to Catherine Ford came the next day. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the flat, weary tone of defeat. There would be no trial. They would agree to all of Isabella's terms. In the final settlement, Isabella achieved a victory more complete than she could have imagined. She was granted a swift divorce on grounds of infidelity. She received sole legal and physical custody of Leo, with Ryan allowed only monitored visitation. She accepted a standard court-mandated child support package, and in a final act of defiance and independence, refused every cent of personal alimony and waived all claims to his fortune. She walked away from billions of dollars, taking with her only what she had truly fought for: her son and her freedom. 1 year later, the chaos felt like a lifetime away. Isabella stood in the sunlit studio of Rossi Designs, her own small but thriving architectural firm. On the drafting table were the plans for a new community library, a project that filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The sound of Leo's laughter echoed from the small, child-proofed play area she had built in the corner of her office. He was a happy, thriving toddler, surrounded by love and light. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, a picture of her 2 smiling kids on the first day of school. The caption read, "They grow up so fast. Hope you and the little man are doing wonderfully." Isabella smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. She snapped a photo of Leo building a wobbly tower of blocks and sent it back with the message, "We are more than you know. Thank you for everything." She looked from her son to the blueprints of a future she was building with her own 2 hands. The fire of Ryan's betrayal had been meant to destroy her, but instead it had forged her. It had burned away the gilded clay, leaving behind the raw, unbreakable steel of who she was meant to be: a mother, an architect, a survivor. She had lost a billionaire husband, but she had gained the entire world. Isabella's story is a powerful and painful reminder that wealth and power can't buy loyalty, decency, or love. It's a testament to the incredible strength of a mother and the profound impact one person's courage can have. Nurse Sarah Jenkins wasn't a celebrity or a CEO. She was an ordinary working woman who chose to do the right thing, and in doing so changed the course of Isabella's life. This story shows us that true strength isn't about the battles you win in the boardroom, but the character you show when no one is watching. What do you think was Nurse Sarah right to get involved? What would you have done in Isabella's shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that matter. Thank you for listening.